Hey everyone, it is February 19th, 2017, and this is your episode 82 of Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and with me today are Laurel Black.
Hi.
Megan Arns.
Hello.
And Ben Charles. How's it going, buddy?
Hey everybody, doing well?
Ben, I heard your podcast with Pete Zambito, and now I know your horrible secret about Game of Thrones.
Well, I don't even remember, what was that?
That you don't like it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's been established.
We'll talk about that later when we don't have to be so professional.
Sounds good.
We also have a member of the sub list here. So Rebecca McDaniel's joining us. How's it going?
Good. How about you guys?
Good, thanks. So Rebecca, you are a grad student of Megan's, right?
Yes, I am a second-year master's student here at the University of Missouri.
Cool. Well, great. Thanks for joining us. Well, you guys, look, our guest, he's certainly, the pivotal example of the industry working percussionist. In fact, I think if we didn't have his career and life as an example, I would not have guessed that someone could have this kind of success doing film and TV, and especially not have this many film and TV credits all to themselves. He's also performed, toured, recorded, and/or collaborated with Harry Partch, George Harrison, Frank Sinatra, and Frank Zappa, just to name a couple. So he's really a legend, and it's really a privilege to have him on the show. So welcome, Emil Richards. How are you doing?
Good, Casey. Hi, folks.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
I'm surprised to see you're in a regular bedroom. I expected a giant gong and all sorts of exotic instruments. So this must be the one room in the house that is not filled to the roof with cool instruments. Is that right?
That's true, but I don't know if you know or not, but I sold my entire collection.
Yeah, we covered that when I did the little historical segment on you to LA Percussion Rentals, right?
Yes, and then Danny Elfman bought quite a few.
Gotcha.
Oh, wow.
Is that right?
Did you hang on to anything? Like any sentimental instruments?
Oh, yeah. The living room's full. I got a studio out here that still has a whole bunch of stuff. But when I say I sold my collection, I had a warehouse full.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's all gone.
What made you decide to do that? And could you maybe tell us a little bit about how you started the collection and how that continued through the years?
I started when I went on tour with Frank Sinatra in 1962. We took a trip suggested to Frank by President John F. Kennedy. And we did a tour for underprivileged children of the world. And Jack said, President Kennedy said, we'll take care of everything on this tour. And Frank says, no, I got my own plane. I'd rather just do it myself. And President Kennedy said, well, then we will meet you in each country and get you through customs so you don't have to worry about going through all that stuff. And that was in 1962. And that is what really got me started collecting.
Okay.
I filled the belly of Frank's plane with instruments around the world. We founded hospitals in every country that we visited, and we visited pretty much of the world. And I just befriended a lot of wonderful musicians, and they took me to different places, and I started collecting. And that was the beginning of my collecting.
That's really awesome. Could you tell us more about the hospitals? And in your bio, it says something that you helped to found the first hospital in Israel for Jewish and Arab children.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, those borders all changed. So I think it was in Israel. The city of Israel. But God knows where those borders are now. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But we founded a bunch of hospitals in Israel. We stayed in Israel for 10 days. And we did every city that we were invited to. And Frank raised a lot of money and just donated it all to each country we went to. And I don't know the particulars of
That's really inspiring.
We really raised a lot of money.
That's amazing.
Well, and you talk about in another interview I saw, along with filling the plane, Frank just being one of the most generous people as far as giving and helping, and it was something he never wanted to take credit for. It was something he didn't want any acknowledgement for.
He did that his whole life. He was there for Bela Lugosi. I don't know if you know that name, but Bela Lugosi was Frankenstein. He did a lot of movies, and he was on his deathbed, and Frank came to the fore and just took care of his whole family and all his medical bills. But Frank did that all the time. I mean, he never wanted credit for anything like that, but that was really his MO. He did that a lot.
Yeah.
So how did you guys as musicians, I guess I wouldn't expect to hear that such prominent musicians were helping found hospitals in these countries. How were you able to start that, and can you tell us about that process?
Well, that came from President Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
He had asked Frank to do this under the auspices of the State Department. He just wanted to do something to help found hospitals in each country we went to for children. It was all for children. So these were children's hospitals that we were doing concerts to raise money to start these hospitals.
Okay.
And President Kennedy said, we'll do this under the auspices of the State Department, and we'll take care of everything. And Frank said, no, I got my own plane. I'd rather do it on my own. And President Kennedy said, well, then we will have the ambassador of each country meet you so that you don't have to worry about going through customs or worry about all that stuff. And that's all I had to hear. I said, Frank, you got room on the plane? Because I'd like to start collecting some exotic instruments. And he said, well, don't kill me, but yes, I have room on the plane. And that was the beginning of my collecting. I really filled the belly of his plane with instruments. And
So at that point, obviously, world music wasn't such a, ethnomusicology wasn't such a huge field in the U.S. Had you been exposed to these ethnic instruments before? And some of them obviously would require different techniques with hand drumming or different sticks or anything like that. So what was your experience like after you acquired the instruments with actually learning to play them?
Well, on that tour, I got to befriend a lot of musicians in each country. And as quickly as I could, I took a couple of quick lessons in each country that we went to. And that was not enough, of course.
Yeah.
The world of percussion is so large. I don't profess to be a good tabla player. There's so many percussion instruments that I am not prolific at, but I do know a little something about each one. And I constantly tried to learn as much as I could about each instrument. But
Gotcha.
Having so many instruments to contend with, I just did the best I could. And when you go to these countries and meet wonderful musicians that can play those instruments really well, it's a little humbling, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have two questions for you, Emil. One, is Frank Sinatra from Sicily also?
His mother was from Sicily. His father was from the north of Italy.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought so.
We're like brothers. People tend to think of us as a trio.
Yeah.
Myself,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. They say Franco, Casey, and Emilio. It's the same. Yeah. I think it's in PAS somewhere. I'm pretty sure.
It's funny, but in those early days going through Sicily, the Italian people all said, "Oh, you're not Italian. You're Sicilian." They didn't look upon Sicilians as Italian people. We were kind of North African.
Yeah, I have heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, we do have a nice Facebook question regarding your collection and PAS. That was an amazing segue. So do that,
Oh,
Rob.
yeah. So this comes from Rob Funkhauser. And he says, "Hey, Emil, I work in the Rhythm Discovery Center in Indianapolis." And he says that your collection continues to amaze thousands of people who are new to percussion and professionals in the field. He wants to know if you have a favorite instrument from the collection. And do any of them have any really memorable stories of how you came upon them?
There's so many there, and I'd say each one of them does have a unique story. I wouldn't know where to begin, really. There's so many great instruments that I was able to leave with Indianapolis, and I'm really proud of the instruments that I was able to donate to that collection.
Would you mind retelling the story of the very big temple bell that you have, which I think you kept in your house, right?
Yes, it's in my living room.
It's a beautiful instrument.
Yes, it is. It's a Buddhist, excuse me, temple bell, and it's so and it was our daughter's playpen when she was a baby. We put pillows in it, and she would lay in it, and I would hit it very gently because it is really humongous sound. If you strike it with any degree of force, it could probably lose your hearing. But you rub it is what you do. You actually rub the bell, and it just builds this humongous pitch. And it's still in the living room, and I don't dare ever get rid of that. I love that. It's a Japanese temple bell.
I was in Taiwan, and we took a little tour of this temple on the side of the street was open for people to walk through, and on one of the floors there was a big temple bowl, and I was with my friend Pius Chang, who we make fun of each other all the time, as you guys know, but I wanted nothing more than to just hear it. And the whole place was pretty open and laid back, and man, that beautiful bell was just sitting there. And I asked him, I said, "Do you think it's okay if I hit it?" And he said, "No, you shouldn't. It's okay that we're in here, but that's sacred. You should, So it's really cool that you have, I guess the Japanese equivalent. It's really amazing."
And well, I feel like maybe I'm making this up, but I feel like I saw an interview with you where you had a temple bowl, and it was someone was using it as a flower pot or something like that, and you bought it for cheap off of them.
Well, actually, that's how I got the one I had.
Yeah.
It was on Wilshire Boulevard, and there was a palm tree sitting in it. I just asked the girl at the shop, "How much for the brass piece?" And she says, "Oh, that's a really beautiful piece of brass." And she was hitting it with her knuckles, and I put my foot up against it so it wouldn't ring, And she wasn't the owner of the shop. she said, I think it's $100. My heart's pounding, And so I said, well, I'll take it. She said, well, I should call the owner. I said, no, that's okay. I'll pay the $100. So she's calling the owner while I'm trying to walk out with the thing. Just a minute. And, busted. And she says, there's something in the back room that came with it. And it was a straw donut that it actually sits in.
Wow.
And she says, this came and we don't know what it is. I don't need it, but I'll take it. A big beater. And the beater didn't have any leather on it. So I wrapped leather around it so that when you rubbed it, it really, really picked up leather to make the beautiful sound that it's supposed to make. So I got those two pieces to go with it. I said, I don't know what these are, but I'll take them. It's worth about $6,000, I'd say.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
What'd you do with the palm tree?
In LA? You said Wilshire Boulevard?
The palm tree was just sitting in it. I just took it out.
I don't need this.
That is my best find, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Emil, that was in LA?
It was in LA on Wilshire Boulevard, yeah.
Wilshire Boulevard.
Wow. Well, Ben, you're going to tell us a little bit about someone that Emil has collaborated with. So
yeah, and
you go for that.
Instrument collections. Yeah, I wanted to talk today briefly about Harry Partch. And I've got all sorts of notes, but I'm going to skip over most of it because I just want to hear Emil talk about his experience. But Harry Partch is an American composer. He was born June 24th, 1901 in Oakland, California. His parents were missionaries that had spent quite a bit of time, it sounded like, in China. So his mother would sing to him as a child in Mandarin Chinese, and I'm sure hearing these folk tunes in another language probably turned his ear on to alternative tuning systems. Also, at a young age, his family moved to Benson, Arizona, and he was around Spanish folk music as well as Hyaki, which is Native American folk music. And at a young age, he learned mandolin, violin, piano, reed organ, and cornet, and his mother taught him how to read music. Not too much later, in 1913, his family moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he began to study piano. And at this age, around age 14, he started to accompany silent films on piano, and he also began composing for piano. So then in 1919, his family moved to Los Angeles when he graduated high school, and he enrolled at the University of Southern California School of Music in 1920. And sort of very similar to John Cage, he became dissatisfied with the institution. He was dissatisfied with his teachers, and he left in the summer of 1922 and moved to San Francisco, where he studied music, especially music composition, independently, just going to the library and reading books. And in 1923, he came across a book called Sensations of a Tone. It was a translation by a German author named Hermann von Helmholtz. And he was inspired by this book to get into just intonation and rejecting the standard 12-tone equal temperament system that's so popular and so prevalent in 99% of Western music. By 1925, he was actually composing using this alternative system, including a string quartet. He began writing a book of his theories in 1928, and in 1930, he burned all of his old scores in an attempt to break with European tradition. And it was interesting hearing his thoughts on music, because in all of Western music, J.S. Bach is such a revered figure, and it sounds like Harry Partch thought that J.S. Bach was like the problem with Western music and where we had taken a wrong turn. And so he was very anti-equal temperament, very anti-Bach. And it kind of reminds me of Non-Caro, where this guy just started composing and sort of existed in his own little vacuum. He's a very isolated figure, prominent figure, but isolated figure in all of music history, that he exists sort of on his own, didn't really have predecessors, doesn't really have successors, just sort of did his own thing. And so, as you can imagine, composing for this system of just intonation, he actually ended up with his own system of tonality derived from the overtone series, where an octave had 43 pitches within it. And because he was composing for these pitches that, quite frankly, didn't exist elsewhere, he, of course, had to invent his own instruments. And if you go on YouTube, there's actually a wonderful, like, hour-long documentary about Harry Partch. But some of my favorite instruments from his sort of creations, where he created a giant kitara, which is like a Greek harp almost. He has an instrument called a marimba eroica, which is a gigantic, just massive bass marimba, as well as an instrument he called boo, which is a bamboo marimba, which looks sort of like a Blue Man Group instrument. And he had an instrument called cloud chamber bowls, which are these suspended glass bowls that have sort of a similar sound to the temple bowls we were talking about a minute ago. So anyway, yeah, and then one of my favorite big-scale Harry Partch works is called Delusion of a Fury, and it's just super cool but bizarre, and I think Emil might have played on the recording for that. And Harry Partch was inducted into the Percussive Art Society Hall of Fame, as well as Emil. I think Harry Partch was in 1974. But don't quote me on that. So yeah, that's Harry Partch. And Emil, I know you worked with him, I guess in LA, is that correct?
Yes, in LA. And when he moved down to Encinitas, I used to make that trek almost 3 or 4 times a week with the ensemble.
Yeah.
We kept that ensemble together to actually record that piece.
Yeah. And am I correct? He had all this set up. He was like able to use like a barn house or something like that.
No, I rented him a house when he moved from Sausalito to
Gotcha.
Los Angeles. I rented him a house in Van Nuys, but the house was just too small. I mean, the instruments cluttered the house.
Yeah.
And it was very, very tight. So he found an abandoned laundromat, and he lived in the back room of the laundromat, and we rehearsed there in Venice, California, and that's where he set up the instruments so that we could rehearse there and perform and really work on that piece, Delusion of the Fury. Harry was a genius. There's no question about it. The microtones that he played were incredible, and Harry used to drink a lot. And, he, as musicians, we were forced, I'd say, to sing. We had to sing the parts, and he would always say, "That's not a semitone. That's 1/5 of a semitone. Can't you hear 1/5?"
Wow.
I mean, we all caught heck from him on everything when it came to his microtones. In most cases, I didn't understand a lot of the theories behind his work. And through him, I met other theorists. One, Irv Wilson, who just passed away this last year, who had 33 tones to the octave. And Harry would say that Irv was one of the only guys that really understood his music. There were a few people that came around that, I was very busy in the studios. I got over 2,000 movie scores under my belt that I worked on. So besides doing Harry stuff, I was still doing conventional music every day.
Yeah.
So I can't say that I went 100% with what Harry was doing, but I did. I'd say I did 100% of what he wanted me to do.
Gotcha.
Because I loved what he was doing.
I wanted to add, it is my opinion here, that it's interesting when I hear music, a lot of contemporary music of such complexity, a lot of it seems very dense, and it's just difficult to listen to. Harry Partch's music, even though it's so complex, is actually it can be sparse, and it seems very listenable to me. If that's I don't like the way I'm saying that, but hopefully it makes sense. I just had a couple of questions. I guess one in particular, was he using some sort of electronic aid to tune these things, or did he just have just an amazing ear and he could just pick out what he was looking for?
He tuned everything from an organ that he called a chromalodian.
Yeah.
Everything was tuned from the chromalodian, and it was very, very easy for him to tune his instruments because of the chromalodian. You didn't mention a couple of really interesting instruments. One was the diamond marimba.
Yeah.
When you played glisses on it, you got these 13th chords that were incredible.
Yeah. So really? To be clear, real quick, the diamond marimba, it's I think it's Brazilian wood, but it is wood. It's shaped in a diamond. It's not a marimba made of diamonds. Just to put that out there.
Thank you, Ben. I was imagining a chandelier. Like, thank you.
Me too.
Up on top was 1 bar, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you gliss this way, you got these really, really wild chords. And I learned to play the diamond marimba, and then marimba reversum was one that I helped financially to get. We found square bamboo for the resonators, and Harry had never seen square bamboo before, neither did I, but that's what he used for the resonators of this instrument. And everything was in reverse of what the diamond marimba was. Like the high bar was here, and you came down to the low bars. But with the reversum, marimba reversum, the low bars were on top, and it came down to the high bars. He just did everything in reverse.
I love his names for things.
Yes.
And then I had one more question. What was his music notation like?
That was interesting. He knew he was working with musicians, so that he wrote, his notation was written in regular music form, but the tones you heard were not the tones that were on paper. That was the big difference.
Gotcha.
If you had perfect pitch, you were in big trouble.
Yeah, I've seen gamelan music. I've seen written like that. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's what he did. He wrote for musicians because he knew they would be the people that would play his music. But the sounds you heard were not the sounds that were on paper.
Yeah.
And once you got past that, you were okay. If you could put a blind ear to what you were thinking about, then that would work. Otherwise, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
There are a lot of replica ensembles now of Harry Partch's instruments.
Yes, I know.
There was one, actually, where I did my undergrad at Truman State University. There was a professor there who was building these instruments, some of these instruments. And so we had, I did learn the diamond marimba, which was really, really amazing. And there was also the slide guitar in our, the slide. And then I think that was it, but he was building some of the big glass bowls as well. But do you happen to know where the original instruments are now, and if anyone is playing on them?
Yes, I do. They're in the University of Washington, in Washington State. The one vibraphonist, Tom Collier, who is a professor at that university. I think he's semi-retired now, but he's the one that was responsible to get the instruments there. And there's an ensemble working. They're slowly repairing, building. duplicating. They're trying to duplicate some of the instruments because those instruments are not going to last.
Yeah.
So what they would like to do is to put them in the Smithsonian eventually, but have an ensemble of those instruments working all the time. And hopefully in that university, that will happen. Little by little, they're working on things to do with those instruments up there.
Yeah, it's cool. You said University of Washington, right?
Yes.
So I have a little question for, I guess, primarily Emil and Ben, but I think any one of us could answer this. And of course, you could find this in a history book, but I'm more interested in hearing everyone's words on it. What do you think music today would be like without Harry Partch?
I would hope that someone would have come up with some of the theories that Harry formulated in his early days.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like I said, he almost exists in such a vacuum that his music is I think very profound and powerful, but almost irrelevant to the rest of the Western music canon. He's just, like Emil said, just a genius that was just on his own. And some of his ideas, just intonation, alternative scales, like Lou Harrison was using as well. From my research, I was sort of surprised. I didn't find a whole lot of crossbreeding or influence between the two, which is odd because they were working on the West Coast around the same time. But yeah, to me, he's just exists so much in his own vacuum. Whereas someone like John Cage, who was also an oddball, I think had a lot more influence on sort of the course of Western music.
Well, John was a friend of his.
Yeah.
Harry and John Cage were comrades in a way, but
yeah,
they didn't see eye to eye musically.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like Cage and Harrison kind of tinkered with things together and, spun ideas off of each other. And Harry, from what I understand, was just, I think, in his own world, really.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, he was way beyond those two guys.
Yeah.
And remained that way his whole life, really.
I'm very struck by him deciding to live in an abandoned laundromat so that he could also have a place to make music.
If you read about him, it's shocking that he did settle down in a laundromat because he was a hobo for a lot of his life. I mean, transient.
Wow.
Yes, he was a hobo for 20 years of his life. He rode the rails and was still formulating his ideas in the boxcars.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, part of the only reason he ever got tied down was just the fact that he probably couldn't travel with these instruments.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Cool. Megan, what do you got happening from Facebook there?
Yeah, well, Emil, you mentioned that you have over 2,000 film score. You've worked on over 2,000 film scores. So we have a couple of questions related to the music industry in California and in general.
Can I just interject really quickly?
Yes.
I want to say my favorite Emil Richards thing is the Simpsons xylophone lick. I think that's so cool.
Good question. Yeah, I wish I mean, that certainly is one that comes to mind quick.
And the Addams Family snaps.
Yeah.
What's your favorite one?
There we go.
Emil?
There were quite a few, but one that I really liked was Maurice Jarre's score for, oh gosh, I can't remember it offhand.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it'll come back to you.
I'm telling
Yeah.
with 2000, I'm completely shocked that you can't remember.
Sorry,
Oh,
Megan, I
I can
hijacked
remember.
it. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Well, one of those questions is from Will Marinelli, who's asking, what have been some of the most notable changes you've seen in the LA scene over your many decades of service?
I like this.
Well, one thing I don't like is the fact that composers now have to literally play the score for the producers and directors before they get okay to record it. And that is so different than when I got here. I got here in 59. And my first 3 or 4 years, I did mostly records. We were averaging, gosh, I knew that figure, 20-something records a week. Each record is about 3 hours long. And if we did 4 a day,
Jesus.
that's either 20 or 24 in a 6-day week. But when I got to doing film scores, in the early days, the composer would go to the director and producer and say, "This is the theme," and he'd play it for the composer, play it for the director on the piano and say, "Here's where the strings are going to come in, and here's this and that." Now, the composer literally, I worked on one with James Newton Howard, and he said, "This is version 64, and I'm not kidding. This is the 64th version of this cue that I've written." I mean, they literally have to, what's the word?
Yeah, like they have to pre-screen and pre-screen some more.
And they have to get approval from the director or the producer who knows beans about music.
Yeah.
They have so much to say. In the early days, the composers used to throw them out. Get out of the studio. You paid me to do this. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
At the end, throw it out. But leave me alone. Let me do my job.
Mm-hmm.
Which was the early days. And it's changed so much now. I'm happy to say I'm still working mainly for one composer, Michael Giacchino.
Yeah.
He's my main guy. I've got 2 big movies coming up. One is another Spider-Man. That's in April. And there's one in March. I can't remember what it is, but anything that Michael Giacchino does, I'm 85 and he's still calling me, and I love it.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Really.
He does the music for Lost, Laurel.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I did every episode of Lost.
Wow, we like
Have you
Lost.
watched the show? Did you watch the show?
Of course.
Did you like the ending?
Yeah.
What was the ending? I don't remember.
He didn't like it. There are 2 kinds of people.
Don't say it. Some people
Oh,
might
I'm not
have
saying it.
not
I'm not
watched it.
saying it, but there are 2. Well, and to say what it is would be impossible because it's so
kidding.
confusing. But there are 2
Yeah.
kinds of people in this world: people who liked the ending and people who did not. Those are called good people and bad people. I think.
I did not. I'm a good
You did
person.
not. Sorry, Megan. Yeah, we'll talk sometime.
Wow.
The
Well,
big
Emil, do you
deep
think
loss.
that change that you mentioned has come about? Like, are they more focused on making money or something? Do you have any idea of why that has happened? That the composers are now seeking approval, or have to seek approval?
I think it's because the producers and directors have gotten a lot of power,
Yeah.
and they've gotten a lot to say with the complete movie.
Mhm.
It's never happened before. And if the composers or directors knew enough about music that they could talk, that would be one thing. But it's kind of bullshit. because they don't know what they're talking about.
Sure.
Let the man do his job. You give him a script, you give him everything he needs. Let him do his job. You hired him to do it. Let him do it. You don't like it, you paid him, throw it out, get somebody else, but let the man do his job. This is what they're not doing. For some reason, it's gotten to where the directors and producers have a lot to say with the music of the film. And music is something they know nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. That comment, sorry, Ben, I know I'm interrupting you, but that your exact comment really coincides with a documentary I'm a fan of called This Film Is Not Yet Rated. And something they explore in that film is the diminishing of good quality script writing and story writing, the more hands that get on that script. So a writer gets hired, and the question to start with, of course, is why is this multi-million-dollar movie have such an incoherent, bad story that does not grab you and you don't care what happens at the end? How does this happen with a budget of what they have? And I think the film answers it just like you just did, which is, man, once the producer gets their hand on it, once the director gets on it, once the star actor gets on it and says, no, I'm not comfortable wearing that, all of a sudden their character's different, and the writer ends up saying, only about 30% of what I wrote actually ended up on the screen. So I guess the question that turns into for me is, do you think this is a problem all across film music, or do you think it's only at the very high budget, really super produced movies?
I think it's happened throughout the industry.
Yep.
And it's just a changed world. It's unfortunate, but it's a changed world. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Giacchino is feeling it too, I'm sure, with the people he works with. He happens to have wonderful people that call him over and over, and they trust him, and they leave him alone to do what he's supposed to do. That's not happening anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not happening. And film composers are they've lost their backbone, I think. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
They're letting the director and producers of the film dictate what they say. And it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's wrong. The music suffers from it. The film will suffer from it. Because a composer is a composer. He knows his craft. He didn't get hired if he didn't know his craft. Leave him alone. Let him do it. You don't like it? Pay him and move on.
Yeah.
It's like, why should you do 65 takes, 65 different versions of one piece of film? You know how long that is? You know how much money you're spending? And you're getting nowhere because you don't like it? And who are you musically? I mean, I don't think I'm washed up. I think I'm speaking from knowledge, from having done it all.
So in that regard, I do have a question related to this. I know one of your big breakthroughs is considered the original Planet of the Apes, and there were a lot of instruments you brought in for that. And from my understanding, it was more than just you brought in these instruments and the parts were written and you played them. You worked with the composer, I take it, on that?
Yes.
So could you tell us about how that went? And, obviously that was in the era when the composer had more say in how your collaboration went on that film.
That still happens with Giacchino stuff. I'm called in at the beginning of most films that I work on. Whether I own the instruments, they just know that I know what the instruments should sound like and what they can add to the film. So I'm called in a lot before the movie gets even scored. And I have a lot to say because I know. I know what can work and what doesn't work. And I think it's saving time. It's saving a lot of time, effort, and manpower to let someone who knows the outcome get in there and do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the director doesn't like something and doesn't know why, it's not a good reason for him to throw it out.
Yeah. Well, and something they said on this documentary was, being in charge, being paid all this money, and it being such a big production, they feel like they have to have an opinion and they have to be in charge and they have to say, but really the way to be in charge is let the person who's good at what they're good at make that decision. Yeah, Laurel, by the way, just wrote in our little chat feed, she wrote email for President 2020.
That was me.
That was Ben.
Oh, sorry, that was Ben. I can't read.
But I'll second the nomination.
Well, other than, I know right now you're still working with Michael and making movies for him. Like, across the course of your career, do you have particular favorite composers that you've worked with?
I know you've worked with Danny Elfman a lot.
Yeah.
I worked a lot with Danny. My favorite composer of all time is Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah. Star Trek.
He was my man.
Yeah.
And Giacchino also. I mean, Michael was messing with film when he was a kid. And he's just the greatest. He's a person who listens to other people, to other musicians. If they have an opinion, he wants to hear them. He wants to hear what people who know his craft are talking about and what they can do to help it. There's no ego when it comes to music, I don't think. I mean, if you're in the know and you can be helpful, speak up, do something. But for some reason, the producer and director have taken that power away from the composer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really unfortunate because the composer is not writing 64 takes, 64 different times of writing the same cue. Give me a break. Give me a break.
Yeah.
I mean, Emil, a lot of this must be related to money, right? Don't you think?
Well, and he's saying you could save money. I mean, I wonder, like, we have all this money to spend, so they try
but
why not save it?
just wonder, as the power structure shifts, and the hierarchy shifts, if, someone to this about money. And we have another Facebook question from Dustin Woodard, who's asking, first of all, he's a Cal State Northridge alumni. And he's saying that LA, New York, Seattle, and Nashville are the big places for living and for studio work. For live and studio work in music. In your opinion, Emil, why is studio work moving from LA to other parts of the US and even the world?
Money.
Yeah.
Money. Poland. Do you know what they do in Poland?
No.
Mm-mm.
Well,
hold your hat. You know when the musicians get paid in Poland? When they get a take.
Oh man.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, that's brutal.
They can be there for a week. If they haven't gotten a take, they haven't gotten paid.
Wow.
The producers or director don't like it, so you're not paid. When they get a take, you're paid.
Wow.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder, is a lot of this, is a lot of this simply there's more people trying to make it as film composers, and there's more people trying to make it as musicians. Just like in higher ed, there's more people who are hungry for jobs. So the more strict the job descriptions can be, and the more positions they can eliminate, just because people are so hungry. Do you think does that play into it?
I can't say why. I don't know. That's going to be determined way after me, I think.
Sure.
I'm at the tail end of my career. I mean, 85. I don't know how much longer I could be active, but I can only say that it's really disheartening to find that as a composer, you're done. Somebody else is dictating everything that you do. It leaves nothing for you. There's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating to talk this way, but that's what it's come down to. And I don't know the answer, but it's dictated by money, I'm sure. But if they can't see that they're wasting more money doing it that way, I mean, 65 takes of something on a film, how important could that cue be?
Right.
65 different takes of something, and who's deciding it?
I just can't imagine how 65 different takes would be that radically different.
Yeah. Well, and Emil, somewhere in one of your interviews, I thought I saw something about someone you were working with, and forgive me for being this stumbly about it, but, things having a little angst and a little, but they're best right before they're perfectly polished, when everyone is just going for it. And I imagine that's in the first couple of takes, right? I mean, you don't get that at take 65.
The first take.
Yeah. After
the first take, musicians are bored.
That's what it was. Yeah, that's right. It was you. You said it. Yeah, that's right. I remember now. Yeah.
They've done it. The first take, you do something, everybody's up for it. After that, they're bored.
Well, yeah, and I remember, even in the more classical music sense than studio work, like Svet Stoyanov talking about recording Con Variations. I think he said he recorded it all the way through, did 2 plugs, and that was it. And they were like, "Don't you want to do more?" No, it's gonna just get worse.
Correct.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. Yeah. Mine too. Start again tomorrow, but the next couple are very risky.
So I have a question, sort of to we're nearing time here, and one question off the topic of studio work that I was curious. It's a question from Ben Fraley. He says, many current students may only know about Alexander Lepak because of his timpani method book and other published books and music. Please tell us what it was like to study with one of the greatest percussionists, musicians, and pedagogues of our field.
With Al Lepak?
Yeah.
Talking about?
Yes.
Well, I studied timpani only with Al back in the Hartford days when I was still living in Hartford, Connecticut. After that, the only time I got to be with Al was when he moved to LA and became a studio musician.
Gotcha.
And we worked together that way.
Gotcha.
Al was wonderful. Wonderful teacher, wonderful musician. I could never say anything but the best for Al. But I didn't really study that much with Al. I just studied some timpani with him.
Gotcha. So where did your who did you study vibraphone with?
I studied vibraphone when I was in high school. This girl, Florence Schaefer, had just graduated high school, and I studied with her. She was a marimba teacher in Hartford, Connecticut, and I was still living there. And I studied with her for a while. Then I met Lou Magnani, who was a vibraphone player from Massachusetts that was living in Connecticut, doing some gigs in Connecticut for the couple of years that I went to a college to kind of stay out of the Army. I'd gotten married and didn't want to get drafted, so I just stayed in school for a little while. But then I thought, I got to get rid of this. It's hanging over my head, so I just let myself get drafted and finish that part of my thing. But I would say Florence Schaefer and Lou Magnani were the two big influences on my vibraphone life.
Gotcha.
Hey, there are a couple Facebook questions that are hinting at the same thing. They're from Alan Lang, Ted Jackson, and Mio Chang. And it's basically about, I'll just summarize for them, how do you stay good while you are so busy? And one of these questions comes from someone who is touring, doing this type of industry work. And she says it's quite challenging to stay sharp while you are working so hard. So do you have any advice for those folks?
If you're working hard and you're doing what's current, you're up on the top. You're doing what is the cream of the crop.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't see how you could be anything but good.
Sure.
You know, I mean, my strongest influence when I was in school in Hartford, Connecticut, was a teacher who was teaching Schillinger method. And he used to say, I'll be a student till I die. And I just took that as something to work for and toward. And I just feel that way all the time. I look for new books. I look for things that can help me learn things. I don't think I'll ever stop wanting to study or learn. And I don't know what else to say. I mean,
yeah,
that's great. That's great. Student for life. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, having seen Emil perform in person and having met him and speaking with him for this hour, is clearly this is someone that has just found something he loves doing and has just done it. It's really as simple as that. And at this point in Emil's career, he's in his 80s and still working, not because he needs to, but because he likes to. And I can only hope that we'll all be so fortunate.
Yeah,
agree.
And the Italian genes don't hurt either with the longevity there.
So are my hands going to work when I'm 85, you're saying, Ben?
They better. Yeah.
Sometimes I don't go in the studio. I mean, I have a room here I call my studio. I don't go out there for weeks. And when I do, my hands may get a little tired, but I can always get to where I was at my best time. Even if it doesn't last long and I get tired, I can always get there because I was there at one time. And that's what I go by.
That's great.
My mental will get me there physically. Whether I can stay there for long or not, I'm still not sure because I haven't tested it for a long, long time. But that's how I go by what I can still do. So.
Yeah. Did you have something, Laurel?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say that I know Ben and Emil have met, and I was actually lucky enough to meet you a few years ago, Emil, at the Zeltzman Marimba Festival when it was in Los Angeles. And I don't expect you to remember me, but but I liked your class, and I have a picture of us, and I shared it with my my friends here, and we all had a good laugh because you look the same. I look completely different.
You look the same because I remember you owe me money.
Right.
I bet so. Yeah.
Well, I just when I met Emil, I was playing the gamelan at UNT, so I was wearing a sarong, but it's basically like a skirt. But I had one more question for you. I think actually the first time I had ever been exposed to you was the George Harrison Concert for George DVD after he passed away, and you played on this beautiful, amazing 25-minute Ravi Shankar piece called Arpan. Could you tell us about working with George? And I think you worked with Ravi as well, didn't you?
I worked a lot with Ravi.
Yeah. Could you tell us about working with those two? Because those are just two absolute legends.
Great question.
George was the ultimate musician. I mean, he didn't care who was in the room, the greatest guitar player in the world. He didn't care. He'd pick up his guitar and play what he could play. He just loved music and he loved to play, and he didn't care what anybody thought of his playing. He just played. And it was an inspiration for me because I just thought, if this guy can do this, there's no reason why I can't do it my whole life, because I've got more study under my belt than he does. So I just respected and admired him so much that he made me want to play. He just loved music so much. And Raviji, of course, one of the greatest musicians that ever lived. And he loved me and I loved him. And any chance I could get to play with him was a joy. I remember we were working on a film that he was working on. I don't remember the name of the film, but everything was dictated. There was nothing written on paper. So we start at 9 o'clock in the morning, and he's starting to give directions to the people in this corner. Then he'd move over here. Then he'd move over here. Now it's 11 o'clock. We haven't recorded anything yet. And he's getting over here, and he's coming near me. And I'm saying, can't remember what he did at 9 o'clock this morning. This is going to be bullshit. It's going to be so screwed up. And then, like 11:30, got 20 minutes to record before our 10-minute break, before lunch or something. And they say, okay, let's put it together. And the thing was amazing.
Yeah, and that's how Arpan was written, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything has been written that way in Indian music. Everything is dictated. Yeah. Nothing is on paper. And it's amazing. It's really amazing what happens. And especially with somebody like Raviji. I mean, he's the boss. He was the boss man. Wonderful musician.
Very cool.
Well, I have maybe one last big question for you that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. And I guess it's simply, how do you feel percussion is doing? Are you happy with the way it's progressing? Or do you think we're missing some things along the way? What could we do more of? Is there something we could do less of, in your opinion? That's a very broad question, but any way you'd like to speak about that, I think would be great.
I think percussion is very healthy. I'm not sure it's progressing as fast as I would like it to, but it's in a very healthy state. And I just think that more people have to share what they own or what they know with others, and take from other people who may know less than they do but have something to give that they can learn from. I think this is the problem, if there's any problem at all. It's being humble enough to know that everybody has something to offer. And for you to want to learn it is something you should really consider doing.
That's great. Yeah, great. That's funny you say that. It's weird that topic of confidence and competence. And one of the things that came through out of that was that the most competent people value humbleness. And that was, of course, a statement of great humility. And yeah, very, very nice. Well, you guys, thank you so much for joining on episode 82. And man, Ben Charles, Laura Black, Rebecca McDaniel, Megan Arns, and of course, Mr. Emil Richards, thanks so much. It's really an honor to talk with you and share your ideas.
Thank you guys for having me, and let's do more of this.
Yeah, sure. We love this. So, yeah, thank you. All right, everyone, take care.
All the best.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.